somewhat circuitous. My first career was in professional music. I got my undergraduate degree in music from UGA, and I got my master's at Western Michigan University, where I taught at the same time. I taught orchestral and instrumental pedagogy. At that point in time, I decided to come back to Georgia. I came back to Georgia, was teaching music and playing in jazz clubs and orchestras around Atlanta. And then my uncle, my great uncle actually, who was an attorney out of North Carolina, came to Atlanta and invited me to go with him to the joint British and American bicentennial bar meeting that they had back in 1976. I kind of got infatuated with the law at that point in time and decided to become a lawyer. Went to UGA, got my law degree. My wife said, "You need to come and work for my father's good friend who was the DA here in Rome." Started prosecuting as a juvenile court prosecutor. Then after I went into private practice, I stayed involved with juvenile court as a guardian ad litem for children. And then I moved up to being a pro tem judge, and then in 2008 I became an associate judge doing court 1 day a week in my private practice. And in 2012 I was appointed to become the chief presiding juvenile court here, and that's how I got here. Seeing the success of what I do, working with families and children to reunite those families, to get the parents to resolve their behavioral deficiencies, addictions, and things like that, so that we can safely return those children home. And unfortunately, sometimes to see that the success for these children for permanency has to go with adoptions. But it's always the joy of seeing the pictures that I get when I see these kids come back to permanency. I've had parents send me pictures. This is the kid that we talked about. This is why I worked so hard to get back. Or the adoptive parents who send me these great pictures of these kids that now have good permanent lives. That's what I live for. Well, maybe I'm biting off more than I can chew as president of the Council of Juvenile Court Judges, but the state of the juvenile court judiciary is somewhat in flux. What I mean by that is this: superior courts are consistent throughout the state. Juvenile courts, it's somewhat of a mismatch. We've got dependent courts and independent courts. Independent courts like my court, I have my own clerk, I have my own court administrator, I have my own administrative assistants, I have my own probation officers, intake officers. I run my court. It's a unified entity. Probably the majority of the courts in the state are not. They're dependent courts. They may have the judge, a secretary, they may have their own clerk of court, but they usually use the superior court clerk. But they don't have their own intake officers, probation officers. They don't have their own guardian ad litems. They have to farm those responsibilities out. I'd love to see the juvenile courts become a totally unified structure. In fact, we even have some courts that have just until within the last 2 years have finally gotten official juvenile court judges instead of letting the superior court judges handle juvenile court on the side. The other thing is that there are a large number of counties and circuits that don't have full-time juvenile court judges. So yeah, that's a big mouthful to chew on, but I would love to see if we can start the ball rolling to get us unified throughout the state. It's going to sound weird, but I'm reading Chapman's Piloting and Navigation. I have a hobby besides my music. I sail. And I'm trying to get ready for my first offshore sail this summer. So I want to make sure that if I do it right and safe, so my wife won't yell at me.